Welcome back to UAP Studies Podcast. This is another episode. I'm going to welcome Michael and Katie, our hosts. They are on the podcast today, both coming in from the United States. How's it going, Michael? How's it going, Katie?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay.
Hey, weren't expecting that.
I wasn't expecting that being thrown back at me. I was like, well, how am I doing? Yeah, that's a good question.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Katie is our new co-host. We actually recorded an episode last week. Unfortunately, the episode was not being able to be released due to some certain sensitive information we have to cut out. But that episode is coming out where I think we're recording it on the 7th with Dr. Joshua Pearson. But I want to introduce Katie because Katie is joining us on UAP Studies Podcast. Katie has been a guest on our podcast several, 2-3 times, or he even hosted an episode with me prior. It was with Christopher O'Brien on the cattle mutilation.
That's right. Yeah, so that'd be 3 times, I think, if we count that. Yeah,
you're used to it. This podcast is an old sock at this point, right? But when we were at Contact in the Desert, which we will talk about today, and sort of upkeep on all 3 of us, what we've been doing. But when we're at Contact in the Desert, I was watching you on the panels and stuff like that, and you're doing your presentation. I'm like, she's very good at describing things. You're good with people. You're not shy. You're stage presence, stuff like that. And I was thinking about it. I was like, we should have a woman on the podcast because so far, Michael, it's just been dudes. You know what I mean? And the bulk of like our guests are dudes. It's a real sausage party in ufology.
Male-centric, area study.
Yeah, but we're starting to see that now more. I think even being at Contact was nice because I got to see a lot of younger women take interest in this. And to me, it's always been a fascinating thing because I think women in general should be interested in this. The bulk of the abductions, 50%, 60% are women. You hear more women being abducted than men. So it's weird that it's more men focused. I think as men, we're more focused on like, oh, look at that shiny thing in the sky because, technology is something nice, but the emotional connection to it and all that, guys have a harder time with. I think women could maybe reconcile that a lot easier than we do. They tend to, as an experiencer, women tend to not, I wouldn't say get over it, but able to handle it a little bit better than guys. Guys are completely terrified because as a man, you're supposed to control your environment, able to defend yourself. And when you're rendered useless and you can't do anything, you get to be a victim for the first time in your adult life. And I think that's why we don't process it well. But Katie, seriously, honestly, thank you so much for joining the podcast. This is an amazing addition to the team.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me on here. And it's my honor. It was so great hanging out with you and your wife, Lisa, at Contact in the Desert and getting to know her as well. And I just want to say it's an interesting point you make about the male-female aspect. And it's something, we don't talk about a lot. But it was interesting because at Contact in the Desert, one of the first panels I was on and had the honor to be on was the Women of Ufology, along with Linda Moulton Howe and Alexis Brooks and Kim Carlsberg. And who else is on there? I'm going to get in trouble. But anyway, it was interesting because the first question asked was, how is it being a female in the field of ufology? And I found it interesting across the whole panel. None of us really see ourselves that way. It's like Linda Howe was saying how she was raised up with the boys and she's always been one of the boys. And for me, it was just my mom and I after my big sister moved out when I was 11. And so we kind of stepped in and did all of Dad's work. But I've never, all the years I've been in ufology and studying and researching, and I'm really kind of a middle of the roads person where I really love history and research and archives and the nuts and bolts side of it. But you can't, the longer you're in this field, you can't ignore the esoteric side, the hitchhiker side, the paranormal side. And to me, they're all connected in some way. So I kind of walk in that middle road place, which I love to be, and I try to do that as the best that I can. But I just found it interesting that on that whole panel of women, none of us really think about that. We just are interested in the topic and we do our work. And so that was
I
really
don't
cool
know
to see
how
that.
sorry. I don't know how I'd respond if somebody said, like, what's it like to be a man in the ufology world? Or like if you're in a restaurant, nobody's like, what's it like being a woman eating chicken wings? You're like, I don't know. It's like everything else I do. But I guess maybe the question that's behind it is like, do you feel weird being around almost exclusively dudes of a kind of weird ilk? Is that weird for you, or is that just what
No,
reality is like all the time anyway?
yeah. I mean, it can be a little, I get a little, when I'm watching the shows, like, my history, just in a nutshell, if for those who don't know, when I was a young girl, I had experiences on a high strangeness ranch in Colorado that I never knew anybody knew anything about. And, after I joined MUFON as a field investigator, I bought a book, Hunt for the Skinwalker by Colm Kelleher, her PhD, and George Knapp, and started reading that book. And in that book, in that chapter, Other Hotspots, learned that the ranch was investigated by Dr. Leo Sprinkle and others. And it's just been unfolding ever since. So, of course, I, watch Hunt for the Skinwalker or Skinwalker Ranch and Beyond Skinwalker, and it's, 95% dudes. So sometimes I'll see the team of 12 dudes and I'll get a little like,
Just throwing the
I'm not
token
gonna
girl
lie
in there
about that.
somewhere,
Yeah, just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
come on, man. But no, it's all right. No, I don't feel weird about it. I just do what I do. I just do my work. I do my investigations, and I would love to see more women out there, in the field, out there investigating, doing all that. And there are a lot of great women in the field. So it's
No
just
joke.
something I don't like you just said. It was great. Like, I don't go and go, what's it like being a woman at a restaurant? I mean, I don't think about it. I just don't think
Yeah.
about it.
I think
So
we go, like, as a dude, if I'm in a room full of UFO people and I know, and I'll be like, it's all guys. There's a part of me that's like, well, if I were a woman, I wouldn't want to be here either. Because look at us, like we're all wearing cargo shorts or something, like something like the aesthetic.
Well, even like growing up, in my teen years, early 20s, you'd watch documentaries on UAPs. I mean, Linda Moulton Howe was the token woman on all of them. Like, you would not see really any other experts that were female. And the thing is, I always wondered, like, even our stats, Michael, like I was looking through our stats, it's men between the age of 20 and 65. Predominantly, we have a 9% female listenership. This is all based off just Spotify, but you realize, like, it's predominantly a men interest. And I keep wondering, like, why aren't women being interested? This affects them as much as affects anybody else. And even at the panel, Katie, I showed up on that. That was way too early, by the way, 8 a.m.
I know
for
it
the
was for me
panel.
too.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like,
I was like
what?
down in coffee,
Oh.
putting on my clothes. Like, I gotta show up. I gotta go. But it was great. It was great to see that panel, and the fact to bring people in, even seeing the people that were there, they were interested. Like, what is it like for women to research this? And the thing is, we need to understand, when anything comes down cerebral, it's even Stevens. Chess is even Stevens. Doesn't matter if you're paraplegic. It doesn't matter if you're a woman. Doesn't matter what creed you are. It doesn't matter. It's intelligence. And when it comes down to research, I find women find things a lot easier than men do, because they'll notice little details, whether it's, guys can overlook quite easily. But even in books, like, I see there's more men writing books on this subject than females. So it really is something I would like to push for the podcast, is to get more women involved in this field. It's crucial and it's important. Everybody's got to play their part, regardless of where we are on this planet. And if it's something that, a listener right now is listening to and saying, hey, I've always thought about joining it, do it. MUFON is a great stepping stone to get into the field, because if you don't know how to do it, they'll teach you the basics. They throw you cases. You could get your feet wet that way, and you feel like you're contributing to something. And then obviously, if you like it, you could carry on and have more of a, well, I wouldn't say career, because there's no money involved in ufology. It's all pocket, it's all expenses paid for from yourself.
Right.
But it's great to do that. And I'm really hoping, like, my daughter, for instance, she's 14 and she sees me do this podcast all the time. I talk about UFOs and aliens all the time. So I could see that she's interested in it. She could hold her own in a conversation about it, and she'll start asking philosophical questions. Well, what about this? And that's what I want. I want people to be able to talk to their sons and their daughters about this openly, where they could come at it and study it and not feel the ridicule that we felt when we originally wanted to do this at a young age. I mean,
this is something we talk about in philosophy, is like that there are gendered ways of knowing and experiencing the world. Like, it's not just like, there's this kind of stupid caricature that, like, men are from Mars and women are from Venus or whatever, like they were fundamentally different. That's not really the case, but like, there's something about experiencing the world as a woman or a queer person or a black person or a man that are fundamentally different. There are insights and ways of seeing that that construe experiences differently. And also, like, if the only people who are writing on this are like white men between 23 and like 65, they're only going to describe it in the way that makes sense to them, right? And so it's not going to resonate in the same exact way as it would if it were being written by, you know, Black queer Jewish women or something. You know,
That's a unique niche. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it would be strange, but like it's equally strange that it's all white, mostly straight men in a certain age. You know, like that's a niche too. So you know, I think diversity is a big thing we need to push for in the UAP community. We need more Black people, more queer people, more. I mean, I'm queer in a sense, but I don't have to like suffer the oppression of it or whatever, because outwardly you could confuse me as like a cis straight white male or something. But yeah, we need as many like voices and kinds of people in here as possible.
Yeah, and I think yeah. Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, I also think there's an age component to it. You ask, you know, why there's not a lot of females. Well, a lot of us, not all of us, and I'm not trying to, I'm like welcoming everybody. But I think women, you know, when we're younger, and same with males too, like you see a lot of not older people, but kind of older people into this field. It's because when you're young and you're in your 20s and your 30s, you have your careers, you're raising families, you're taking the kids to, you know, baseball games and whatnot. I know for myself personally, I didn't have time to study this at all until my kids were kind of established and didn't need the amount of care they did. Then I was able to kind of take a deep dive. So I think there's an age component to it. It's not just male, female, or this, that. It's, you know, there's a lot of little things that go into why somebody gets into this field. So
it's, yeah. And you
go for it.
No, I was just going to say, you brought up a good point that it, you know, when you're younger, you got more things to preoccupy your mind. But I think whatever experiences you do have as a kid or even as a young adult, that's what triggers it later on. I mean, I didn't get really involved in this till I was 30, but there is a stigma, especially because when we were younger, if you were a male, you got away with the stigma of, hey, you believe in UFOs, rather than a young girl, like, hey, you believe in UFOs. And I understand that. People would respect, for some reason, white males' opinions on this more than they would a woman's or whatever. Back in the 90s and 80s, there was still sexism going on, and you had to like stick to your niche. Like you couldn't go into somebody else's field. Like it was weird, but that's not the case anymore. And that's progress. And the thing is, you know, what, like Katie mentioned, like you start investigating this phenomenon and it starts out one way, but it takes you into a loop of all the other crap that comes with it. And you're like, oh man, it's not for the faint of heart. It really isn't, because, you know, I was opposed to Bigfoot forever. I still kind of am. I'm biased.
You're opposed to Bigfoot, like your pitchfork out.
I'm like the only guy outside in a forest, you know, with a sign like, I don't believe in it. Right?
You slept with my girlfriend in high school.
You slept with my girlfriend. I found the hair in my bed. I know it was you. Yeah, but it's true. Like I didn't want to. I'm like, I don't think.
What do you tell me? What you mean though? What do you mean you were opposed to Bigfoot? Like you thought it was just a silly topic?
Oh, I didn't. You know, and I live in Bigfoot country, but I just saw this nonsense. Like nobody's ever captured a picture of it. Nobody's captured video evidence. Like, why? We're 2024. We still can't get a picture of Bigfoot. And every time you do, it's always blurry. So is Bigfoot blurry by nature, or is it just the pictures we take? Right?
It's just a blur.
Yeah, it's just a blur. Like maybe they're just blurry whenever they're on cameras, but there is a link between the Bigfoot activity and then UFO activity in the same area. And sometimes they're spotted at the same time or within a very short, you know, matter of time. So I was like, well, now I can't dismiss it because it's linked in with my UFOs. You know what I mean? Like I can't just say it's a separate thing like Loch Ness Monster, which I would love to, but it's not. It's related to the field.
Jeff Kripal says you start reading about UFOs and years later you end up reading like Indian mystics. And that's just for him, it's a path of initiation. This is all the weirdness of the world leads to this like mystical path. And I think there's something to that. I mean, because I remember when I just first started reading about this, lying in bed reading a book, and Kelly was like falling asleep, and I just blurted out like, "Oh, we got leprechauns now." There was like it was a Jacques Vallée book, and a leprechaun story had popped up, and I was just like, it just never ends. The weird.
I understand that too. Jason, I'm a lot like you. It took me a while to come around to the Sasquatch phenomena. And like you, through the High Strangers Ranches and the APRA report, and even on the Colorado Ranch in my childhood, we had Bigfoot sightings and, and directly related to the crab. So I picked up Stan Gordon's book and picked up that. And then as fate would have it, I bought 8 acres in Bailey, Colorado, right by Jim Myers Sasquatch Outpost Museum. If you're in the area, Bailey, Colorado, check it out. It's awesome. But I had just like the bangs. It was at dusk. We had just put in a big water feature on the property. I was up there alone, just relaxing on the back, swinging, and it was the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life.
Oh, really?
And I got really uncomfortable in the smell, and so I went into the cabin and I waited for my daughter and my husband at the time to get home. And when he got home, that smell had moved off. And I'm convinced that big water feature we put in maybe attract the attention of this Bigfoot creature. So I was like, huh. So I literally have a pin on the little map of an encounter. And we went out the next day because by the time they got home, it was dark, but looked for prints and hair and any evidence. I didn't find any. But the more I've gotten to know, and I've researched out at the Meadows down south with Trey Hudson and his team, and Grumpy Bob Wilson, who unfortunately we just lost recently. He passed away, but he's a Bigfoot guy. And, the Bigfoot world, I was surprised to find out, is as big, if not bigger, than the UFO community. And the more I've gotten to know these researchers and experiencers, I'm like, okay, there's something to this Bigfoot thing too. And to your point, Michael, humans are funny because then, I do a paranormal investigation and somebody started talking about fairy lights and fairies and little fairies, like the Irish traditions, where they have little clothes. And I'm like, okay, now that's just too much.
Yeah, where do you draw the line?
I can't do that. Where do you draw the line? But then
this is so funny. Tell me what you guys make of this, because like, I think it's funny that you two are both like, we're a hard sell on the Bigfoot thing. Whereas to me, and I guess I'm sort of like the more skeptical of the three of us, or rationalistic or something. I don't know. Bigfoot was like easy to swallow. Like the idea that there's some undocumented hominid species that might live in some small population and is like roaming around in the thousands of square miles of forest of the Pacific Northwest. Like, that sounds plausible. It doesn't sound super likely, but it's like we thought gorillas were a myth until like 1890 or something. Nobody in the the European white world believed that gorillas existed. They thought they were just lies from the interior of Africa. Now, like, we know. So the idea that there might be something out there like that isn't strange to me. But you're also thinking of Bigfoot as like a supernatural phenomenon and not just like an undocumented biped or something, right?
Yeah. Like it would pop in and out of our reality, because the thing is, if there was a nest, if there was a cave, by now 2024 we would have found something. There's so many people researching this. Well, unless they're really, really cunning at hiding. But my guess is because they're always linked to crafts of some kind. It's like either they're let loose or they come in whenever these things are present, but they're never, again, it's not a repeatable scientific process. You can't repeat what you did.
Experiment, yeah.
No, and I was laughing because at one of Katie's talk, she was doing her talk, and at the end there's like a Q&A, and one gentleman comes up and he goes, "Oh, just so you know, they're attracted to bacon." And Katie's like, "Yeah, I think everybody's attracted to bacon."
Bacon, dude.
Yeah. I would eat it before the Sasquatch shows up, then he would be pissed. But I just don't know enough about the subject. I don't, there's no physical pictures. I mean, the closest one was what, the Patterson video.
The video that could be somebody claims to have been the person in the costume. That's
a fancy costume from the 1960s. I'll tell you that. Like, it just, even the breast of this female Sasquatch is moving naturally. I mean, they would have had to put a year's worth of work in that costume to make it look that realistic. I don't think it is. I think it's probably the only realistic. And now they stabilized it because it was quite shaky at the time. He just caught it, luckily. But I think maybe that was it. That was the only video evidence that we've ever got. Everything else has been blurry or hearsay. Like somebody's like, they were broke into my home. And it's like, okay, but you didn't have a camera or phone to film it. Like, it makes no sense. But there's enough evidence. There's enough people screaming out that it is a real phenomenon. And it seems to be like even in Colorado, Katie,
Yeah.
like it goes all the way down there. In BC, where I live, Harrison Hot Spring is like the national Bigfoot city. Like people see them all the time. It's a hot springs area. So anywhere by natural resources, these things tend to be around. Same thing with the UFOs, natural resources. So I think we just camped out at those sort of locations for a period. We might be able to find these things, but just randomly going into the woods, like that's like throwing a quarter in the ocean. Like good luck, right?
Yeah.
That's my thought on it. But no, I was gonna say with the woo factor that comes along with this, and even consciousness. I mean, we keep hearing about consciousness. That was another thing. We're like, what is that about? I'm conscious. I'm aware. I have a Pepsi right here next to me. You know, like, but that's not the consciousness they're talking about.
Right.
And it's that connectivity. Even I'm just gonna say it. We had the time of our lives at Contact in the desert. What was amazing was that everybody there was on the same page. There was just a mutual, like, hey, how are you? People would just come and hang out with you. It was almost like church, like what I remember of church, where everybody's just open. And it's weird that these sort of things, whether it's a religious thing or, you know, you're studying something, like it brings people together. We unite. Doesn't matter our differences. You know, there's people dressed up in all kinds of things at these events, and you don't even bat an eye. There's just an acceptance of people, which I found to be so beautiful.
It's like you get to go to a place where you're united with others who share the thing that often makes you feel divided from others, right? All of a sudden, this thing that you kind of like have been holding inside now is the thing that binds you all. I mean, that's kind of like there are a lot of conventions that feel that way, and church feels that way. I mean, I really miss the church. I used to have a communal religious life, and I don't anymore. And it's because church sucks. I realized it's boring and shallow. And I mean, this is like evangelical Christianity, you know, it's my opinion of it. But no, yeah, going to a place where everybody kind of like, no, you're not going to be judged for this thing. You're not going to be like an outsider or something.
Yeah, I always like to say, I mean, once you kind of have that community and you have these deep conversations about things like consciousness and the nature of reality and Sasquatch and all and you go somewhere else then and the conversations are like, how's the weather today? And you're just like, where are my friends that I could talk about these deep topics? And I think that to me is the great thing about it. And right, we don't all agree on everything, you know, but we can all talk about it. And I love that too, because I think as a society, that has been lost. As divided as people are now, I miss the good old days where we could talk about our differences and talk them out and understand each other and come to the middle. Let's come to a middle ground. And most people, you know, once you get to talk to somebody, even if you think that they're quite different than you, once you sit and have a conversation, you're like, you know what? You end up like best buddies at the end of the conversation. And I love that about it. I love that about this whole community. I think that's fantastic. And it should be like that everywhere.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case. But even with like the diverse lectures and presentations that were there, like Matthew James Bailey's coming on. He's an AI guru, if you will, Michael. Like this guy knows, like, but he's trying to say we need to have an ethical AI because it could go sideways very, very fast, which most likely will. Because knowing our nature, addictive nature, people will willingly plug themselves into the matrix. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no machine that will do it. We'll willingly do it, just to escape the reality of our situation. But Lisa got so much out of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, she absolutely loved it. Loved hanging out with you and Tony, Katie, which almost every night. Like, I didn't think that anybody would recognize who I was. I'm like, I'm just going to show there. You know, I'm going to be, you know, just quietly in the back. But some people did, which I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was meeting people and seeing the genuineness of that. There's a few people I've met that I'm like, okay, my suspicions on them were true. I won't mention them, but let's say there's a few people in this field that egos are huge. And I avoided them like the plague during the time we were there. I didn't want anything to do with them. No pictures, no asking them to be on the podcast. For me, it has to be about the heart. And, you know, you guys are part of this podcast because your heart is in the right place. Your minds are in the right place There's no egos. It's about progressing into this field and learning more about it humbly. And what I hate is like, they'll invite Nick Pope on the show and they say, "Oh, UFO expert." No, there's no
There's no
expert.
UFO experts. There are
No,
no
we're all
such
students. Like, who's an expert?
anything with the word unidentified in its name, it by definition has no
Good
expert.
point.
Yes, no
Good
expert.
point. Yeah. But it is the narrative. I think, we want to have somebody who knows what they're talking about on TV. So then, when they flash it, the person doesn't go, "Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about." Well, it says expert right there in the title. But the reality is,
in all fairness, there are people that have been at this for 10, 20, 30,
Yes.
40 plus years, and they've read a lot of these books. I mean, these books behind me, I take notes, front to back is pretty rare. I don't have the time to read all these, but there are those that are there's some people I know in the field, and I don't mind saying their names, like somebody here in Colorado, MUFON, Barry Roth, and even David Marler and others that I know that they're like a walking UFO history encyclopedia, and they know the dates and the names, and I'm always like so impressed by that.
Me too.
Yeah,
I'm not one of
experts on
those.
the history of the subject. So
yeah,
that's
so there are those.
yeah, people who are experts on the history of the subject,
Yeah.
but they won't claim to know. I'm skeptical of the people who are like, "Let me tell you what this is all really about."
Oh, right. Those people. Yeah, right.
Those are the people
There's
who
a difference.
Yeah. But like
Sure.
Robert Powell at SCU, we've interviewed him, and he has that sort of encyclopedic understanding of the history of the subject, but he's not going to tell you here's what UFOs really are.
Right. When it comes to the motives, we don't we have a human lens. We have a filter, just like you were talking about the start of the show. Our lives give us a filter. We can't help that. And so it's really hard to put our filters over what the motives are of extraterrestrials that may or may have not visited our planet. So I have a hard time with that as well when somebody claims to know more. That being said, in doing my book, Letters of Love and Light, which is really a book dedicated to Dr. Leo Sprinkle's 40 years of research, and I spent 3.5 years in his archives going through letters from people. One of the things that people talked a lot about was this channeling and getting the information. And a lot of, those claims of this, so-called experts in the field do come from that type of channeling or meditation or that. And I'm on the fence. I can go back and forth on that. I kind of, I believe that we can do it, but how reliable is the information?
But that's a rational mind. Yeah.
Sorry,
Michael. Yeah.
I was going to say that's where I am is I believe a person when they say that a stream of information came and hit me, and it had something to do with this topic. But what puts me off is the fact that they always seem to think that because it seems supernatural or at least very strange, that it must be true, like that there could not be deception or there's no interpretation involved. You couldn't possibly get it wrong, because there's no doubt that lots of people have had these experiences and all of their all of the information isn't compatible. It doesn't all fit together, so who do we believe? Well, I believe all of them really, but I don't necessarily believe that what they've gotten is the truth. Who's the guy that we had on who his dad has this sort of telepathic communication with friends of the universe, or what
was this Samuel Chong, I think, was talking about the Australian guy. Yeah. The Australian guy that got the message. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about somebody different. His oh god, what an asshole I am. But anyway, his dad has received these sort of telepathic communications from the group of people who call themselves Friends of Humanity or something. I'm like, yeah.
Reed Summers, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think your dad's lying, but I don't know that I think the information your dad's getting is right. There might be deceptive or mistaken forces at play,
or even the receptor. I mean, you could get a message, but if the receptor is not filtering the information, you're going by what knowledge, trying to apply this stuff that is obviously not normal. So I think based on the different interpretations of the receptors, it's one thing. But what's amazing too, and I was talking with Katie about this very briefly, but there's people who are experiencers, and they normally are lifelong experiencers, but then there's people late in life that are given a task. And I never understood why they wait till the person is so old to give them that task. The guy here in BC, David Hamill, like, I mean, he was in his 60s when they told him to buy a property all the way in Ontario, which he did, and because there was a lake there and he had to protect the lake from being polluted, which he did. And then he started building a flying saucer in his garage. Katie,
I think I have a reason maybe why that might be.
bring it on.
I think all of us, if we incarnate on this planet, we're here to learn and grow. And so maybe, there's somebody, I don't know if we're in a simulation or what you want to say the scenario is, but maybe there's somebody up there just kind of waiting, watching, when is that individual going to be ready for their task? And it's really cool that you bring up the task or mission, because that's one thing Dr. Sprinkle talks about, this pack. See, the preparation and these stages that experiencers go through, this spiritual growth that people go through. And that's another fascinating topic, which I'm sure we'll touch on many times throughout this podcast, but how a really scary experience can turn into something that is beneficial to the person who experiences later on. And that was true in my case. The ranch stuff was terrifying when I was younger, and now it's opened up just a spiritual, right?
And you're helping people. That's the thing, is that you in turn around and said, I'm going to help people, instead of just saying, well, this was personal to me. You actually got off the couch and did something about it.
Yeah, and so many people are doing that. So I think maybe the answer is they're just waiting for the right time. And for some people, it's in their 60s and 70s, and it's never too late. We don't age like our parents age, thank goodness. So,
no joke.
I feel like we can go into our 70s and 80s and still have at it. So
might it also, I mean, it might also be that the thing that you were saying before, Katie, that like you spend a lot of your life in this bubble of like making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and taking kids to whatever, soccer game. And if something is trying to talk to you, it might be the case that like you have to be in a certain state of receptivity to get it. And if you spend 40 years like just sleepless and frantic, you're
survival
just not gonna,
mode.
Yeah.
But the thing that's weird too is that, I've been looking at mental illness with this. And the thing is, you could be mentally ill. And I'm not saying like, even if you're schizophrenic, I don't know, but in a sense of like, depression, bipolar, that does not limit them from selecting you for some reason. Because if you're a good person, usually right brain people remember it. I'm not sure if left brain people do, but there's never been a psychopath, a sociopath, or narcissistic. And those people only care about themselves, and they will never do anything for anybody else. But the people selected, whether they're abductees or people that are given a task, they don't fit that mold at all. They're actually really good people. They're nice to talk to. They'd give their shirt off their back for you. So it's interesting that these specific people are being targeted, and not the people who are self-centered, narcissistic, and cannot have consciousness because of their egos.
I would like to add one other thing to that. It's a great, fascinating list. And I myself I'm super interested in that topic. And I hope we do a whole show on it, because my half brother, spent time at Pueblo State Hospital and dealt with a mental illness, Chicago State, on and on and on. It's a long story. Anyway, so I'm super interested in this topic. But what I wanted to say on top of what the list that you had, something else I noticed is that people that tend to have these experiences and are involved in these phenomena and all, and it makes sense logically, because they're people that aren't really dogmented into a certain view. They're people that seem to be very open and curious about all different types of things. People who study world religions, let's say. I find most people that are curious about this topic are curious about a numerous amount of topics, and they're very open. They're very open to a lot of it. That's step one.
I think that so I don't know. It might be that psychopathic, narcissistic people do have these experiences, and they become like cult leaders or something, like the Heaven's Gate cult leader. What did he call himself? Doe, I think was what he called, D-O or Do. But he, I think, might have had a legitimate contact experience and turned that into something really dark and
Very
awful. So I don't know if we have the data that I would want to be able to confidently say what contactees are like, but I think that if I went just based on the people I've talked to who've had these experiences, I would say exactly what Jason is saying, that like they seem to be open, generous, spirited people. But I think you can still go wrong. Like even if you have that
Oh,
openness,
100%.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
can
yeah.
be overtaken by it or something. There's a kind of danger. And I'm more and more slipping into this framework of thought where I see this as this whole UAP weird high strangeness world as a kind of path of initiation into like a deep spiritual, or at least, you know, psychological, philosophical shift in how you understand the world. And I think that you can go down a certain degree of that path and then turn it into something dark, or there may be, you know, right-handed and left-handed versions of the path, or something. But no, it's an interesting question.
I think some people start off with good intentions. I always like the idea of fresh, new white sneakers, Nikes with all you can drink Kool-Aid. That'd be awesome. That happened in the 90s. For those of you who don't know what happened, there was I think it was called Hell's Gate, the cult.
Heaven's Gate, that's what I was just talking about.
Heaven's
Yeah,
Gate, yeah,
Heaven's
Heaven's
Gate.
Gate. Yeah, they all drank poison Kool-Aid and all had nice Nike sneakers, and they were
Well,
gonna fly
the
on the
Kool-Aid
comets.
was actually Jonestown, the
Oh,
Jonestown
I'm
massacre.
mixing them both
And it
together
was
then.
and it was Flavor Aid,
Oh,
not Kool-Aid.
Flavor Aid.
It
Okay,
was a
gotcha.
different brand, and
You'll
Kool-Aid
like
has
this. It's Flavor Aid. It's not Kool-Aid. It
yeah,
won't
yeah.
kill you. Take a sip.
The
Scary
company
stuff.
behind Kool-Aid has pointed out a few times that it was actually not their product. But yeah. The white sneakers was Heaven's Gate, though.
Yeah, but we are experiencing that to a certain degree, probably not to that extent, but you're looking at like the division that we have amongst our ranks. Let's just put it, there's several big names that are all fighting themselves, calling each other disinformation agents. Every single one is like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. And we're seeing that more and more. Don't need to name names, but you guys in the audience knows who I'm talking about. And it's like nobody has the answers but me. I'm the only one who has the answer. I have everything. Everybody comes to me. It's like, I'm starting to think that this is done on purpose to get everybody fighting, and you don't know what's true, what's not true, who's getting the right information, who's not. And this would be a great tactic for the powers that be that want to keep us in the loop. It's like, no, we'll just throw out so much information and we'll tell this guy this, we'll tell this guy that, and we'll get them fighting so nobody listens to them.
I think it might also be that so when I entered the field, like I came into the subject from totally left field, like I had no background in it at all and had to immediately orient myself to it. And my impression was that there are people who do have some contact that is in like the intelligence or military or government world who is feeding them information, but the information sometimes from those people turns out to be so disappointing. Like they tantalize the public with it and then let out some shitty video or like redacted screenshot of a signal conversation or something, and it's so inconclusive and uninteresting that it makes me think, well, they had to have had a real contact, but that contact seems to be like giving them information that's intentionally disappointing. And why would you do that other than to just, I don't know, kind of screw up the public perception and make it seem boring?
Right. And it's so hard now because once you're outed that way, and I'm just thinking of Richard Doty here, who is a nice guy. I've talked to him, but once you're known as that, and he's coming out now saying he wants to, tell the truth. I'm sorry, you could try, but I'm always going to have that filter of, do I believe it or not?
Was he the
But
dude
that being
drove
said,
somebody crazy?
uh,
Is that who he
no,
He drove
he
one
came
guy
in.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Dulce base. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So he came in 1977 in the Air Force and was hired to be a disinformation officer. We don't want the public to know what we're working on, so let them believe it's UFOs and aliens, and he took that and ran with it. And I think there's little bits of trickles of truth coming out now, but it's such a messy thing. And you're right, Jason. I think they're trying to make so much noise and put so much information that we're all just don't know where to go or what to believe anymore. And I would like for all the listeners, I think it's so important to just turn down the noise, turn off the news, turn off the TV, just because our world, we're always on our phones, just constantly been being bombarded with different information. And I think that's part of the game. It's part of the game to keep us all unstable and easily controlled and confused and on all that. And that's certainly the case in all these different topics that we're into. So, take a day every week just to turn it off.
Yeah. Well, in your country, the CIA has spent decades trying to figure out how to manipulate its own public, how to give it false information, how to control things. And we're starting to find out they're controlling the political aspect of things too, with, not releasing the Jeffrey Epstein evidence and tapes, because then they could control all the powerful people and say, hey, if you don't walk the line, we'll release the tapes. We know this is to be true because the only person serving prison time for males having sexual relationships with minors is a woman. Gazelle is the only one serving a sentence. There's no guys, there's no more lawsuits. It all went away. But you, the general public, you will be controlled. Because that's what they've been doing. They've been trying to figure out how to do it. They're good at what they do. They've been doing this for years. They got computers helping them. Murking the waters on a subject like this is super important. Because
I will say I do not know enough to have an informed opinion on this topic.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
But the PSYOPs, we know they've been doing PSYOPs for years. Even with the Project, what's it, Project Grudge? Project Grudge.
Very beginning of
you can't get better than that. Listen to the title. Project Grudge. They have a grudge against you, right? They don't want you to know. It's right there in the freaking title. But approaching people and saying, look, don't talk about it, make fun of it, blah, blah, blah. Now it's not going that way. They can't control it. They have to change their tactics, and that's going to be by murking the waters, giving Dr. Greer some wrong information, giving this guy some wrong information, right? And they're charlatans. Let's just face it. We're only fighting these establishment. We're fighting the charlatans and saying, look, we're not all like this person. There's no female charlatans, just male charlatans. I won't put that out there.
No, I don't know if that's true.
You don't know if that's true? Well, there might be some charlatans. There might be some female ones, but they're not. They don't seem to be as aggressive as the males. But again, it's that mentality of being a single-handedly, one entity, one person will bring light. It's like, look, it's almost like a religious thing, because in religion, you have one entity that leads the way, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. I mean, we all know there's charlatans out there and people trying to make some big money out there if they can get it. That being said, I think it's always important to listen even to those people that you don't agree with in the field. And case in point, just about 3 nights ago, we were watching a particular podcast. I'm not going to say which one, but they were actually sharing some of Dr. Greer's papers, and it's like 30 some odd pages. And I had just, after Contact in the Desert, I went and did a fantastic interview with the widow and the daughter of a really high-ranking CIA person and learned some interesting information about MK Ultra and some Black Access projects that were going on at the Colorado Ranch, and learned some kind of terminologies and things like that. And here I am looking at this letter from Dr. Greer, and they're talking, I don't want to give it, they're using the same terms with these, I was like, freeze frame, take a picture. I need to get this document. So even if you don't necessarily agree with somebody or for their motives or reasons for doing something, there's still valuable information for your research in a lot of these people's work. So you have to look at all sides and then triangulate it and come to your own conclusions, to use your own brain.
Said.
Find that. Yeah.
I feel like we've just crossed the line into now admitting that we all think Stephen Greer is full of shit. I just want to document that. But I'm probably the least knowledgeable of the three of us about that. But that's just been my sort of gut impression when I meet. There's certain people you just see like 10 minutes of them talking, you're like, oh, this person's full of shit or whatever. But maybe. I'm okay. I'm more okay naming names, I guess, because I'm not polite or good person.
I was going to say, I don't think he's full of shit. He's done a lot of good work in the day. I just sometimes don't always agree with certain aspects, but to say
he's changed over time.
Yeah,
right? He's changed. He had a really good strong start, but his finish is not that good, you know. And I think what happens, like you were mentioning, Michael, like somebody becomes over time, if everybody always comes to you, gives you the information, you're like the guy always on TV, you become, you know, your ego becomes like, I'm this person, you people should listen to me, and never being wrong. That's a problem that I don't like. You know, on the podcast, we tell people all the time, it's okay to be wrong. I've changed my opinions on things all the time. You don't have to have the same opinion in 5 minutes from now than you do right now. There's nothing holding you to it except pride, right?
Doesn't Stephen Greer, isn't he the guy who sells like $5,000 contact field trips or something?
And
but
no
also the
snacks
dude who
included,
organized
not even a juice box. You bring your own sandwich.
But he
Bring your
also
own drink.
organized the first disclosure project, right?
I think it was his
That
first
national-
disclosure one, but like when he did the one in New York, the thing is, it got I mean, it got lost in the news because of 9/11, because it took place just a few days prior or before or after.
Oh, really?
So it just got lost in the wash. People were just watching the footage of the Twin Towers falling down. That was it, right?
Yeah, he does a CE5, and you know, I'll just throw it out there. It's my personal belief. You don't need to go pay somebody $5,000 to do a CE5. We
Yeah.
all have it within each other for free. You know.
Yep.
Just-
And highlighting, you know, satellites going above is not UFOs, but you know, if people don't know what they're looking at, we
Right.
have, you know, apps on our phones, you know, like Flight Radar, what's the other one, Stellarium, like it could show you everything that's above you at any given time. But I guess those aren't allowed when you're there because nobody ever takes any pictures. So I think it's designed to be a certain way, and that's the problem that I have. That's what
Right.
creates a charlatan. Somebody saying, "Hey, let me give you an experience that's not real." I need to tell you this, Michael. I think I told Katie this, but I need to tell you this. This is funny. There was a CE5 session at Contact in the Desert. It was behind the hotel in a big grassy lot. It was awesome. There was like a few hundreds of us there, and then we were all holding hands in a big circle. It was beautiful. It was like, again, reminiscence of church, and you know, that sort of. I think there's actually something there for us to be together like that, whether it's church, religion, or it's just something to unite us. But I'm holding hands with a woman here on my left, and then Lisa on my right. And Lisa always wears shoes. That pisses me off because I told her we're going to be a lot of walking. Don't wear those shoes. No, she needs to wear those shoes. So somewhere throughout the evening, she has to take the shoes off, which of course she would because we're just standing there holding hands. So she whispers to me, I got to take my shoes off. So she goes down, she starts taking her shoes, which takes forever, like a long time. And at some point, it just dawned on me, she just left me holding this woman's hand. Like I'm just holding this random woman's hand and my wife is like not even there. I thought, well, that's freaking hilarious. Like she would
You're my
totally
new
put
That's
me in that
funny.
situation, right? Yeah, exactly. This is awkward. And once you catch in, you're like, wait a minute, I'm holding somebody's hand. You go red and flush because you're like, I don't know this person, right? It was okay when my wife was holding my hand, but now it's not okay. But I just thought that was funny because I was always right about the shoes every single time. I'm like, don't wear those shoes. No, it'll be okay. No, it won't.
They
In
look good with the
Vegas-
dress.
No, exactly. But in
Yeah.
Vegas, you're gonna walk, right? Like a hotel's right across the street. You can see it, but it'll take you 4 hours to make it there because it takes forever to get anywhere. So in Vegas, I'm like, don't wear those shoes. No, I'll be okay. I was right. I hate being right. I hate being right. But no, you know, it was a really good event, and that's what I wanted to touch up on, just about, you know, the connections that we've made there, people we got to talk to, and there was really like, you know, I think it was Tony, Katie, that called Linda Moulton Howe because I said I want to meet her, but she's
Right.
just walking by behind me. He's like, Linda, like as if you know her, like just come over here. And that was amazing. Like she's so little, Michael, like
Yeah.
tiny. Like I gave her a hug. The first thing I said is like, can I hug you? And she goes, yeah. And she was just like this tiny little thing. Like,
Well,
yeah, exactly. Just pick her up and throw her, right? I wouldn't do that, but that's a good way to get remembered at Contact in the Desert. We don't invite Jason anymore. He throws people around. But it was cool. The lectures were awesome. And I highly suggest for anybody to go there. Now, Michael, we are invited next year. UAP Studies Podcast will get VIP passes to be able to interview anybody we want there.
I will go next year. I think that this SCU conference is not going to schedule itself at the exact same time.
I
as
hope
Contact
so.
in the Desert.
Yeah.
Because
you could share mutually the audience.
Yeah,
would
I
mutually attend both.
agree.
Yeah.
And I think with a new leadership for Contact in the Desert, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for good conversations between SCU and other
Mm-hmm.
organizations. Like we really need to coordinate. There doesn't need to be like this sort of silo of different organizations
Need to work
studying.
together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you say,
Yeah.
Jason? It's teamwork to dream to make.
Teamwork to make the dream work.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. And I always like to say contact is special in that it's a trifecta. I love how Ron and Contact in the Desert is approaching these different topics because it just opens it up from this for the scientific voice, bringing in AI, Graham Hancock and all that. And then you have the UFO research and experiences. And then you have the more metaphysical side. And it's like a trifecta of all of it together. And to me, that makes it unique and special. And it was a great time.
Can we also just talk for a minute about how interesting Ron is as a person? Like I had a call with him and I was like, so how did you get into this? He's like, well, I was a personal assistant for Mick Fleetwood and Barry Manilow for like 3 years. And I was, whoa, wait, you did what? It's like, I just do whatever Barry Manilow told me to do. Like how many people have that life and are like, you know what, next is UFOs.
Yeah. What a contrast though, right?
Yeah.
Going from the music industry. And Ron was Ron is such a sweetheart. His brother Rob, I absolutely love Rob. His brother was awesome. Every time he saw us, he came, he shook our hands, super nice. And the thing that was funny too, and I got to tell you this, Michael, the first day, so Thursday, I'm just walking around where Lisa and I were just having a blast. And Lisa wanted to see, I think it was Matthew James Bailey was supposed to talk, but Paul Hynek took over. And Jamie, the one of the girls that organized it, was just a completely sweetheart. I told her, like, if anything I can help, let me know. So we're about to walk into the room, and she goes, "Hey, do you want to introduce Paul Hynek? Because the guy that we had didn't come in." Well, I'm like, "Oh, sure." Like when? They're like, "Oh, in 10 minutes."
It's like Alan Hynek's son.
Yeah, it's his son, and he's been really active in the community. I'm like, sure.
He worked on like the Predator movies, didn't he? He's like a consultant.
His brother did. His brother did the Predator effects. Yeah.
I don't know if it's right here in my door. Let me see. I got a little gift from Paul Hynek.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I don't know.
He was actually our roommate. Not a roommate. That sounds bad. He was actually the room right next to us in at the hotel. Yeah, the sweet neighbor. Yeah. But
anyway, I have it. I thought it was sweet of him. He baked me a cake cookie as a thank you. I thought that was sweet.
He baked you
he baked me a cookie.
Awesome.
That you don't want to eat that cookie. You want to put that on a wall.
Freeze that
mount
like a wedding cake.
It was actually delicious. It was like gluten-free and, not completely sugar-free, but it was good.
Yeah, he's nice. Like I got to talk to most people there. What I was going to say, Michael, is that they asked me to introduce Stephen Bassett right after him. Right. So I got two of them back to back. Now, what's funny is that one night, Katie and I, with our spouses, were sitting around and a couple comes up to us, "Hey, you two were on TV." We're looking at him like, what? It's like, you two were on TV. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how did I end up on TV? I'm just attending. But I guess NBC.
YouTube is TV now, though.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But NBC was there the first day, just recording a few things. And they had recorded my intro of Paul or Stephen Bassett, and they played it on TV. So it makes it look like I'm giving a presentation at Contact in the Desert. I'm like, what are the odds of that?
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's so weird. I was like, I laughed that night when we saw the video. I'm like, I wasn't doing anything.
That means a producer looked at y'all and we're like, those two, they're good looking.
That's the two. Oh. Let's not get anybody else. Who is the guy with the turtleneck? Makes no sense.
I want to give a shout out to Dan Harari too. I think you have him as a guest scheduled coming up right here. And he runs the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance and was part of Contact in the Desert as well. But you had mentioned like Ron's background with the music industry, Dan Harari's background with Hollywood. Like some of the, like there's something to that with this field, right? Like the actors, the musicians, the artists, Jason, you're an unbelievable artist. There's something to that. That's part of
right-brained.
Whatever
right-brained.
Yep.
Yeah. The creative aspect of things. Like I said, it's rare to find somebody who's left brain. Now, the only person I could think of is left brain that is super interesting in this field has got to be Jacques Vallée. You know what I mean? Like I have not seen him do any art, but his analytical processing, his way of understanding things. To me, as a kid, when I saw Close Encounters of the First Kind, I thought it was so cool that it was a French guy that was like the leading investigator, because that's a French Canadian kid.
Yeah.
We didn't have any representation in that field at all. And all of a sudden, he comes out, was like, oh man, that's so cool. And then to find out it was based off of Jacques Vallée. And what you get into his work, like, that's the way we should be. We should be humble. Same with John Mack, which is a huge influence on me. Humble, listen, right? It's just that's what creates people to be comfortable with you to share your story. And you get a lot more data that way.
Right. I was going to say we need everybody. Like I could sit there and when I came into MUFON for the first time, it's kind of known as that nuts and bolts organization, right?
Yeah.
The scientific study for the benefit of humanity. And it was kind of this fight for me to kind of like, well, what about this? And what about the high strangeness and, the ranches and but we need all. We need the scientific side, the nuts and bolts in both. So, just saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a plethora of things. The thing is, if we're dealing with a civilization, that's complex enough to try and understand a civilization's way of thinking, that they're not like us, their brains are different. But if we're dealing with a multitude of civilization, not only interdimensionally, maybe some of them live in our oceans, behind the moon, maybe some of them do come here. Whatever it is that we're dealing with, if it's a large group of entities, we don't know what their intentions are. We don't know how they think. Right. I can see why that's a military problem, because you don't know if there is a threat. Are they scouts for a takeover? Are they, what is the issue here? But getting to it, and I think it's exciting. I think personally, because humans, we've stopped really exploring. Once we solved the world and we conquered the world, we just stop exploring. But our future's in the stars. Our futures are amongst these other civilizations. And that to me is so exciting. I'm excited by it. And I'm always thrilled by it. I'm like, you know what? Even if they are here, as scary as it is, because obviously they're so far advanced, it looks like gods to us, like the way that they operate. But how fantastic is it that you're alive to experience it and to be able to question it? That the universe created you to question that, to become part of that. That is huge. And, we're mentioning about the right brain, left brain people. The people that innovate the world are right-brained. The people who criticize the world are left-brained, usually. But the right-brained people will come up with a chair, a table. They'll come up with art. They'll come up with inventions. Think Nikola Tesla. That guy was right-brained the whole way. So it's innovation. And that's what we need, is we need to create that within and that's the biggest fear of today's generation. My kids, I take them off their devices. They have to draw. Bella's a big drawer. James left to play sports. Do that. Because the more we lock ourselves into our homes with our devices, like you mentioned, Katie, we're not looking at the skies. We're not asking questions. Why would we? We're content. And when you become content, you become apathetic. You don't care. Right. You just like, it's just the things that I love. This is my world. It has nothing to do with me. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have. Plus the divide. We see the divide in everything. Are you gay? You straight? You white? You black? Are you like, everything's a divide. And it's like, we're not united in any shape, way, or form. It's like, it's almost on purpose what's happening right now. Keep us divided, keep us fighting, and we'll never unite under the banner. But we're starting to see that shift now. We're starting to see that more and more people are fed up of that. They want to unite again. They want to stand for something, because now we don't stand for anything. It's a free for all. And that's the biggest problem, not only within ufology. I think we're a little bit more practiced and a little bit less woo-woo, but I think in the world itself, like, it's a free for all. And that's the dangerous part, because the free for all is really based off of our technology, right? You wouldn't have people killing themselves trying to take a selfie off the Grand Canyon if they didn't have cell phones. Like, you think about how many people died trying to get social media, good pictures and stuff like that. People die all the time. There's tons of videos. They make video. There's websites based on this stuff. So the idiocy of our species, especially with technology, that's going to be the creepy side.
I think there's like so I'm a little skeptical of the left brainness versus right brainness thing. I think that people think they're modes of being and that you can shift between, but people do tend to stay in one or the other of all the different modes that we have. But to the point about like the sort of technologization of human life, there's a sense in which like our technological world is kind of replacing nature. Like, you don't play in nature, you play in your video game consoles or whatever. But and I know that there are a lot of bad things to that, right? But one of the things, and I've written and done some presentations at universities on this idea, I have that technology shifts radically are what it means to be human and the ways in which we're human. And those shifts from looking at them coming into the future, those are apocalyptic. I mean, they're not just apocalyptic. They're like, um, you know, devastating. They really do destroy, dystopian in a way, destroy what it means to be human. But looking back on them, once you've gone through the shift, they aren't. They look like
Mm.
advancement to some new way of being human. They shift because they change our values, right? And I think that the shift that we're going into, this thorough technologization of nature itself, is apocalyptic to us now. It won't be to our children, who will look back and see, mistakes that we made and ways that we tried to correct them. But what I'm really interested to see is whether the strangeness of the high strange phenomena starts manifesting itself in the technological world in the same sort of form or new forms than how it manifests in the natural world. Because if it's just a part of nature, it should
Right.
manifest in all the different dimensions.
Very good
Right.
point.
Do you think that we're going to, in our lifetimes, let's say in the next 20, 25, maybe 30 years, see a division where we're either going to link with Neuralink and, let's say, use CRISPR technology to make designer humans? And some people are going to be on board with that. I mean, it's really tempting to have like this in my brain, right? And I need a map to somewhere and I just think it and then it's there.
Mhm.
Is there going to be a big divide, do you guys think? People who choose to do that and others
Michael
who do
James
not?
Bailey will be awesome to talk about this, because he, like, in his presentations, that's all he talks about. Like what,
Right.
and the thing is now, if you guys think about it, they're trying to do a digital ID for everybody. So it'd be linked to your bank account, be linked to whatever activity you do online. They would monitor your health. If you start plugging yourself in, like, think number of the beast from the Bible. What's the number? It's an ID code, right? Everybody will get one. If you don't have one, you
Yeah.
can't operate. You can't buy food at a grocery store. You can't get medical. You can't get any assistance. Your bank accounts are closed. You either comply or you lose out. One of the little
Yeah.
girls that was interviewed by John Mack at the aerial school phenomenon, she said the message that she got was, you must not get too technologed, I think is what the
That's the
word that
word
she
she
used.
used,
Yeah.
technology.
technology.
Ahead of your spirituality. It needs to go in tandem. It needs to go together. If one spirituality could supersede artificial intelligence and technology, that's not a problem. But if technology supersedes our spiritualism, we give up on the spiritualism, because the very gods we worship, we now are able to create. We are those gods. Our AI is able to help us. What I'm interested in is, will AI be able to help us in ufology? Will it find common denominators or
Definitely.
point us
Yeah.
in the right direction?
Oh, yeah.
That's good. But the scary part, and especially what Michael James Bailey was saying, is that if you, let's say, instead of dating, right now with AI, you could create the perfect girl that you want to look exactly the way you want. You can have a bodysuits that you feel everything with your visual. So you willingly plug yourself in. You're not going to go dating, because now you could have the same effect of being with somebody just at home. That's going to create big problems, a decrease in the population. Not only that, but it becomes addictive now, because you got all the senses plugged into the computer. And are we willing to do that? And that's what I mean. People are willingly going to plug themselves into the matrix, because once, like, you see those, it's like a circle, but the guys can run it and play VR, and
Yeah.
you can
Oh,
have
yeah.
that right here and live an entire different reality. You know what I mean? And people are going to want that. They don't want to live in regular, painful reality that we live in.
To respond to the question whether I think that's going to happen, I think that the answer is undeniably yes. But there's reason to be hopeful and reason to be absolutely terrified of it. Reason to be terrified of it is that it will be apocalyptic in all the ways that we imagine it will be. This is just the nature of technological change. I mean, if you look at the history, this is something I did in grad school. I read all these books on the history of technology and people's responses to them. And you look at these alarmists, whenever there's some new transformative technology developed, there are alarmists who are like, this is going to fuck up everything. I mean, like the stove was a technology that there was
The wheel.
enormous pushback against. Susan B. Anthony was one of these people who pushed back against the invention of the stove. Why? Because it's going to replace the hearth as the center of the home. We're not going to sit around this common place that
She
gives
was
us food and
right.
She
fire.
wasn't wrong. Yeah.
Absolutely right. That's the thing is, they're absolutely right. The alarmists generally are. Their specific worries aren't always right, but the idea that these things are going to come along and like totally disrupt something is absolutely right. So you have to ask, are we now living in a dystopia? That, I mean, it certainly is a dystopia to them, but it feels good to us, you know? But yeah, so the dystopia is coming. People are going to plug themselves in. But what we also do is we have the ability to look back and see how we got it wrong, like how this screwed up past, you know, good things that we had. Like if you look at the return to interest in vinyl records right now, that's the way people are looking back and being like, streaming is awesome. It's great that we have digital music technologies, but we lost out on something. So we can go back and readopt it. And I think that shift is going to happen too.
Like books. I still like a good old-fashioned book in my hand with this good old-fashioned highlighter, and call me old, but there's something
It's
about
the
that.
smell,
There's
the
certain
smell
things
and the touch, right?
and the
Yeah.
touch and the.
But it's
being
not an
able to
either
take
or.
yeah.
You can do both. Right now we have
You could do both,
people who
right?
do both. So they're going to be people who are like living most of their life in some sort of virtual thing, but also going out and like doing other stuff.
Right.
But like one thing that I worry about, or not worry about, that I think about a lot is the idea that we draw the line wrong when we worry about new technologies. Like you were saying, well, I have this cell phone and I would love to have this cell phone in my brain, but then that's like crossing a line. But to me, like we're already transhuman, and the fact that we're using our cell phones as a kind of secondary brain appendage, right? Why do we think the line now is like whether it's inside or outside of our skin? That seems to me like kind of a
biggest fear is being
arbitrary
hacked, though,
line to
Michael.
draw.
Like if we're able
You
to
can
hack
already be
computers.
hacked.
Yeah, but that would just be weird to hack a person, you know, and mess up with them. I mean, somebody could kill you if you have a pacemaker and they just hack you and stop the pacemaker from working. I mean, there's a bunch of issues that will pop up. I'm sure there's even going to be jobs in a virtual world that people will like suit up, go into work just here in their you know, living rooms, and they'll plug in and then they'll work 8 hours in the digital realm. Also, you know, when with that VR stuff, I don't know if you guys tried it. It makes me sick. I can't stand it.
It makes me nauseous.
Yeah, your body thinks it's being poisoned, so it's doing this weird thing, and I can't stand it. But if you're in it for 8 hours a day, again, we don't know what the repercussions of technology is when it's brand new. There's no data. Even like these OnlyFans girls today, there's no data saying what their lives are going to be like in 20 years, but it will come. They're all guinea pigs. They have no idea what that will do to their lives, which, trust me, I'm pretty sure it's going to wreck them. You know, there's kids right now committing suicide because their moms do OnlyFans. So it's going to affect them in a way they cannot control, because there's so much content that they put out on digitally that will affect you. And I think that's the biggest threat to us, is that there's no more personal stuff. There's no more, like, everybody knows everything about you. And I think it's almost like the Borg, you know, we'll all know everything about each other, and what one thinks, the other one will think. And that's a scary bit. The individualism, the spirit can dissipate that way.
Right. I was going to say, Michael brought up a good point. I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, we know that the CIA can already hack our brains. We already know we're being programmed through commercials and television and subliminal messages. And this has been going on for decades and decades. So, you know, you made me think about it. Like, what's the difference between having my second brain here in my hand? It'll just be more of a convenience to have it here. And that's how probably it'll be sold and marketed. Like, just put this little tiny chip here. You don't have to carry this around anymore. You just go beep, doo doop, you know. So it's just crazy. But,
or they go to a grocery store and like, yeah,
wave your hand. Well, we're really freaked out about it being in our body, but I think that's probably not the route it's going to take. There are all these technologies like transcranial or transdermal cranial stimulation that uses electromagnets outside of your head, and that can do all sorts of stuff to your brain. Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot of like incentives for companies to build versions that don't freak you out, you know, so they're probably going to find a way around that to at least some extent.
As long as Google doesn't make virtual reality, I think we'll be fine, because Google has a track record of screwing up everything and not really planning their stuff out. But, you know, if Elon Musk comes out with something, as long as there's ethics, with AI, as long as we understand what ethics, what boundaries, do we have fail safes? Like there needs to be things, because it's undocumented, it's unprecedented. We have no data on what technology does. I mean, for us, technology came in late. I mean, I was probably 30 something by the time I got this kind of cell phone. Didn't exist before. I remember the rotary phones. So I've seen how much progress we've made in my lifetime at 43 years old. I can only assume what my kids are going to be living through. And every time there's a new piece of technology, a new one comes out like next month. So even if you buy like a new iPhone, they'll come out with a new iPhone next month. So you're always playing catch up.
The rate of technological change is itself accelerating. Things are changing fast.
Well, supposedly kids in Japan and China are going broke because they keep buying the new phone. It's status for them. So if you got the new phone, you're in. If you got the old phone, all your old news. And iPhone, we both know, is just capitalizing on it. They're not doing anything new with their phones. They just slap a new number on it and say, buy it. So that's the part that I have a hard time with, is more, the corporate greed. Exactly how is it going to go down? Do you want to lose the people using your services? What are you going to do to get them addicted? Because we know we get, was it dopamine or serotonin releases whenever you get a notification on your phone. So much less now if you're just,
I'm going to puke whenever I get a notification on my phone.
Yeah, but imagine now it's in your head. You're at the grocery store shopping, like ding, ding, ding. Oh, I'm going viral right now. Like, it's crazy to think what the world is. The only thing that I think is good is if we actually start recording everywhere we go, because then people will capture Bigfoot or, aliens or something.
But he'll be blurry. He'll be blurry.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be blurry. It's like, oh man, there's something wrong with the glasses. But yeah, I don't know where this is going to go. I think Michael or Matthew James Bailey will be perfect to talk about that. He's considered an asset to the U.S. government when it comes down to this. So the guys, I've seen him, 3 talks when he was down there. Holy crap. He's impressive.
He did 3 at Contact?
He did three or 4 lectures at Contact. And every one of them were great. He had different panels on and talk about spiritualism versus technology. Like, it was really good. It'll be perfect. It'll probably be a 2-hour interview with him for sure. So we do have, guys, we're just going to wrap this up here, but we do have a plethora of good guests coming up. We do have Thomas Jane. He was supposed to be here today, but he'll be here on the 5th. So by the 6th, we should have the episode out. We have Gary Nolan coming on as well. I'm missing somebody here. Well, Matthew James Bailey's coming on as well. I'm missing 1 or 2.
Dan Harari.
Yeah, he's coming on as well. And we got Jeff Siller coming on too. He's a guy that's closer to me in BC, guys. He's an abductee, but he's done research in abduction cases and close encounter calls here in British Columbia. I really look forward to meeting him. I met so many Canadians at that convention that were from BC that are in UFOs. I'm like, where are you guys? Like, I can't find you when I'm here. I have to come down to California to find you.
Start a meetup, like a meetup group.
Yeah, well, I think that might be it. There's so many Canadians that are involved in like wanting to do something, but are there's no interest in this country. But if you go down to the States, you see how much interest is. Obviously, bigger population. I think California is the population of Canada. So, I mean, there's a lot of people interested. But the more we can bring this to the forefront, I mean, our listeners are great because they're worldwide. And, they keep up on this stuff. They're not dumb. They know what they're, they know their research. They do their research, which I always think on Twitter is a great place to outsource anything. Is this real? Post it on there. And people will come up with they're great investigators. I find it to be such a great tool. Obviously, a lot of idiots that will go and attack you.
And the Mick West, he's great for that.
Mick West is great. Yeah, good suggestion. But actually, and that's another thing too, is people jumping on the bandwagon. Automatically somebody comes out like just Jason Sands. Everybody jumps in on it. Like, just wait. What happened to waiting and investigating, just seeing how it plays out instead of saying it's true, it's not true, you guys are idiots, and they go. It's like piranhas. I always think it's like lowering a goat into still waters full of piranhas. You know what I mean? That's exactly what Twitter is. Whenever I post a post, that's exactly the visual that I have. Yeah. Just we wrap this up. Katie, do you have anything coming up that you're doing that you want to talk to the audience about?
Yeah, I'm just really, I'm busy, and I'm so excited to be a part of UAP Studies Podcast. But I have started up a Rocky Mountain Ranch research, and I've just been going out in the field, investigating and interviewing witnesses in not only Elbert County, but revisiting other locations, going out to Wyoming to the Carl Higdon site. And we're going to be going out to the Wilson Ranch in Trinidad and just traveling. Got a trip to New Mexico planned. And whoever knew I'd become a content creator, but here I am. And the reason that I want to do this Rocky Mountain Ranch research is because I want to take you guys along with me while I go on these adventures. And actually, so it's like bringing everybody with trying to figure out the mystery. Yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is what the interview went like. And that's what I did all morning this morning. I was putting together video number 2, which was a great interview with an elk hunter, a really credible witness. He's a firefighter, has lived in the area of Elbert County his whole life and had a really very unique, strange encounter. So went out there, went to the location, interviewed him, and I'm putting that together so I could put it out there to share with all of you. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Michael, do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, I'm working with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies on creating a series of interviews. I guess it'll be a podcast in that sense, but mostly with SCU members about the research that they are doing, so that people can kind of keep abreast of the most like recent scientific work in the subject without having to read journals. That's kind of one of the problems that I see with the UAP public, is that there's really good work being done, but it's not super accessible in any form that like people who aren't academics have access to. Like even if you as a public wanted to read journal articles, you'd have to pay for a subscription or something to the journals. So we thought it'd be a good idea to sit down with people in SCU and be like, what do you do, and what can you tell us about this subject? We haven't released anything yet, but one of the things I'm pushing for also is to do a UAP podcast host panel discussion where we get various podcast hosts on the subject, like YouTube, to come on and talk about like the state of UAP discourse. So that's a project that's been going on in the background for a few months, and we're getting close to being able to launch it. So I can't wait to see what people think about it.
Well, I'm proud of both of you guys. The fact is that you're active. You're doing something. You're more active than I am. I'm not gonna lie to you. I host this podcast. I do my research, but I'm not out in the field. I'm not out talking to people at SCU. I mean, we have them on the podcast, but I'm super proud of you guys and the work that you're doing. And this is, I could not be happier with the team and even Sage. Let's give a shout out to Sage for all the work that he does behind the scenes. But this is great. And this is how we move forward. And really, I do believe, like, be the change you want to see in the world. If you don't see anybody doing it, do it yourself. And I think all three of us, we were at that point, at some point in our past, where we said, well, nobody's doing it, I might as well do it. I'll raise my hand, I'll contribute. But the fact is, you guys have been contributing a lot. You're both now content creators, but you're both still doing your research. It's crazy. It's crazy, but you got to this point. I mean, you worked your way up to this point. And that's the thing. Again, it's your heart. It's who you are as people. That's what's really important, because it makes people listen to you guys. It knows that you're not full of crap. You're not egotistical. As long as we stay humble in this field, I think we can make progress. But like I said, it's ego is a consciousness killer, as far as I'm concerned. If you have an ego, you're not conscious. You're only self-aware. That's it. Right. And I try not to be that, trying to change, but like I said, I'm still biased. I'm still human. I still do things that I shouldn't be doing. And, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware. That's step number one. Awesome. So guys, if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. Keep up with us. We are putting out some new episodes starting every Sunday. We do have several of them coming up. There are going to be some 2-parters for a lot of these episodes, because we're doing presentations as well. Anybody from the SCU, Michael, that you think would do a really good presentation, just invite him on as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrangle Kevin Knuth. I think we're going to get him.
Nice. He's. I had him on so early in the podcast. He wasn't even, like, SCU was just beginning at that point. So it'd be great to get a catch up with him for sure.
He's a fantastic specimen of humanity. Yeah, we'll get him.
Well, there's so many of them that are good. Doing good work, and the thing is, they're not getting the praise that they should be. There's other people taking the limelight, which I don't think they should be. It should be a lot more diverse. But so this was a great episode. Actually, we got to catch up. We got to talk about contact in the desert. We got to know Katie a little bit more. And next presentation should be our boy Thomas Jane. He was going to do the presentation today, guys, but he had a sore throat. Presentation's awesome, but he wouldn't be able to deliver it the way he wanted to. So I said, okay, no worries. We'll reschedule it for next week. Not a problem. But we had you two lovely people on today, and I appreciate your time, and we'll do another episode.